Can you hear me? Yeah. Yay. All right. There it is. Yay. I love it. Only I never can figure out where this cursor is. Come on. I got it. Yay. So it's so good to be back with you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much to Shivananda Bahamas. Like I said before, every time I come here, I feel at home. And that doesn't always happen. And so I'm just so grateful to be a part of this. And thank you, Durga, for inviting me, as always. I love it. So grateful. So very grateful. So tonight we're going to continue our conversation, right? So we're here for the Yoga Recovery Conference, right? And this idea of healing addiction, habits, and harm, right? And using universal teachings, universal wisdom teachings as a basis for that. So we're going to continue that conversation. Before we do, I want to invite us into a practice. And it was the one that I spoke of in the workshop today. It's one that I dearly love and that I use all the time in my own life and in my work with others in the world. It's a little practice that we simply call find the middle. And the whole idea of finding the middle, again, the middle is a place where there's a possibility to access the wisdom to know the difference, right? To access what's next. So it really is a little centering process. And centering is a way to regulate the nervous system and to reset it. And the deal about it, and what I love with this, especially in working in a context like this with a group, is that it's about nervous system co-regulation. It recognizes that my nervous system affects yours and your nervous system influences mine, right? That way. And so, and what we recognize with that is that's just not an interpersonal process. It really is a biological and neurological process as well. So this version of it is a little bit longer than it takes. One of the things I love about this is it really only takes about 30 seconds. So it's something, when I remember to use it, it's something that always brings me back. So I can keep coming back to this place where there's a possibility for choice, where I'm not caught in the past or I'm not wrapped up in the future. I can really be present. So I want to invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze. And then just take a moment and bring your attention or your awareness inward. And simply feel your body as it is, without any real need to do or change anything. And now I want to invite you to create, or you can even imagine, tension in your body. If you want to create that, you might do something like shrug your shoulders up towards your ears or make a fist and feel what that feels like. And then release it. Let your body soften. And now the invitation is to go to the other extreme. Sense or imagine just looseness, where there's almost an absence of any structure at all, or form. You know, I always think of the cartoon character Gumby. And just feel that. And then release it. And now the invitation is to find the space in between, the middle, where there's enough structure to feel supported, but still enough softness to stay open. The middle is the place between too much and not enough, past and future, good, bad, right, wrong, inferior, superior, demonize, idealize. So just feel your body supported here. And then consciously bring in your breath. So simply find a breath that's smooth, without jerkiness or jumpiness. It's even, so the inhale and exhale are about the same length. It's full, yet it's effortless. It's unforced. It's seamless. The inhale follows the exhale, the inhale, without a gap. And in this moment, it's quiet. Is breath known by science and the ancients to bring us back to a sense of homeostasis in our being, a sense of calm abiding to the present moment. This idea of finding the middle, softening the grip, and coming to the breath brings us into a place of choice where there's a presence of choice. It's something that we can always pause and keep coming back to. So I invite you here now to take a big, deep breath in, and this time let it out through your mouth. Let your jaw relax. And maybe even do that one again. Take a big, deep breath in. And exhale, just let it out. Just let your jaw relax. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and present yourself to the space. And maybe even look around you at others, our community that are here in the space with us. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. So last night, we kicked things off with the disease of disconnection is what we were speaking about. And the big idea around that addiction and habit isn't just about substances or willpower. It's about disconnection. Disconnection from ourselves, from others, from spirit, from the earth itself. And we named what we often call addiction in my work, we named it as the disease of the lost self. It's not a moral failing. It really is a survival strategy in a world that actually profits from our disconnection. We talked about some of the systems that we've inherited designed to elevate some and silence others. And these systems and how they condition us to chase worth outside of ourselves. And we explored a little bit how both the yoga and the 12-step program invite us not to bypass pain, but to move through it. Yoga calls these patterns that we were talking about samskaras. And the 12-step call us into what is often phrased as a fearless moral inventory, right? And that's kind of same, but different. I love that phrase. I heard it first in Thailand many years ago, right? This idea of same, but different. Yeah. We also brought in the concept of avidya, right? Or spiritual misperception. the real root cause of all suffering. It's what leads for us to mistake the temporary for the eternal, the painful for the pleasurable, the not self for the self. It's what fuels that chase. And then we touched a little bit on paradox, how healing asks us to hold both the pain and the possibility, the shadow and the light, our humanity and our divinity. And earlier today in the workshop, our 12 o'clock workshop, we worked with some tools for reintegration, those fragmented parts that I know I left hanging out there, here, there, and everywhere. How to gather them in, how to reintegrate them. So we're all home and playing on the same page. And so now tonight we're going to zoom out again, and we're going to take a look beyond the individual to our communities and to the collective. And for this one, I've got a few slides. I got a few slides for this. And this first one, what I want to do here is offer this from the 12-step program, just to take a moment and look at the steps. So in the 12-step tradition, the first 6 steps are really all about the me, the individual. They're about internal reckoning. We admit, we believe, we decide, we take inventory, we share it, and we become ready. And this is deep personal work. It's deep personal work of humility, of self-honesty, of surrender and letting go. But there's a shift that happens right after step 6 in the 12-step program, where the I begins to transform into the we. Because recovery, real sustainable recovery, can't stop with just the individual healing. It's not just about getting our own house in order. It's also about stepping into relationship, into repair, into responsibility with the world around us. So in steps 7 through 12 in this program, we begin to move outward. We make amends, we serve, we carry the message, we integrate what we've learned into every area of our lives and into our communities. It's kind of, again, same, but different. The same thing we see in yoga. We may begin on the mat, turning inward with breath and movement and meditation. But over time, we come to realize that yoga really isn't just about the self, the small s self. It's about how the self lives in the world, how we show up in relationship. And then Vedanta reminds us that the self we're healing really isn't separate at all. There is only one self, expressed in many forms. So the healing of one is tied into the healing of all. So as we move through this talk, from the individual to the collective, I want to just invite you to think about that bridge. This is a turning point where healing expands, when the I remembers that it belongs to a we. And in my work, very often, what I'll see is it can be challenging for folks to cross that bridge from the I to the we. And oftentimes, it can be a place where relapse happens, right there. right? Because if we don't make that transition from the I to the we, the words I kind of use for it, it's almost like the grape dries up on the vine. The grape dries up on the vine. So I wanted to offer that so we can see that there really is a progression, whether it's in the 12 steps or yoga or Vedanta. We start with the self, right? We reckon, we remember, we restore. But then the path calls us outward into relationship. So as this keeps going, it ripples out, and eventually it asks us to all look at the water we're swimming in. And that brings us to where we are tonight and what we're going to go into tonight. And what I'd like to start that with is a story that the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu used to share a lot, because it really, for me, captures the heart of this shift. So the story is about a group of monks who live by a river. And what the monks started noticing is that people were being carried downstream, and they were struggling, and they were crying out for help. And so the monks quickly gathered, and they began pulling people out of the water, rescuing as many as they could. But no matter how hard they worked, the people just kept coming. Finally, one of the monks decided to stop and start walking upstream. And his cohorts called out to him, "What are you doing? Where are you going? We need you here. We need help." And the monk replied, "I'm going to go upstream and find out how they're getting thrown in the water to begin with." And this story, what it really points out is that it's not enough to just keep responding to crisis. Sooner or later, we need to go upstream. So that brings us to some conversation. So I want to invite us here to just pause for a moment and really name something that's often invisible, but it's still deeply felt. We live in a culture of separation, a culture that teaches us to prioritize individualism over connection, that rewards performance and perfection over presence, that tells us if we're struggling, it's because we failed. But that's not the whole truth. And there have always been other ways of knowing and other ways of living. Indigenous, African, yogic, and ancestral traditions all remind us we're not separate, that we are all part of a living web. And that's what a culture of independence honors: relationship, reciprocity, and belonging. And this is not just theoretical, it's actually deeply practical. It's woven right into the 12 steps. The 12-step program that I am a part of begins all the steps with we. Everything begins with we. We admitted we were powerless over. We admitted that our life became unmanageable. And that's not a private confession. That's a collective reckoning. This idea that we don't heal alone. The meetings, the sponsors, that relationship, the circle, that's where the real medicine is in 12 steps. And yoga really kind of begins the same way. Not with the poses, but with the yamas: ahimsa, satya, asteya. These are all about how we live in harmony with others. Because yoga just isn't a path to individual liberation. It's a practice of sacred relationship. And Vedanta reminds us that thou art, that you are not separate. The same self lives in you, in me, in all beings, and the separation is really an illusion. What's the truth is connection. So when we look at this slide, side by side, in that way, the culture of separation, the culture of interdependence, the question becomes not so much which side do we resonate with, but which side do we practice? Which side are we really practicing? And asking ourselves the questions, which side are we building into our systems, our communities, and our healing spaces? That's what the shift from disconnection to wholeness, for me, looks like in action. And this side speaks to healing, right? And it says healing is relational, and it always has been relational. The first bullet point on this slide says healing equal whole. And that's not just a nice idea. That's actually the root of the word itself. Healing comes from the same Latin root as whole, W-H-O-L-E, and it's holy. And from the very beginning, healing was never meant to be a solo endeavor. It's always meant to be relational. A really important distinction that I assert we don't talk about enough is the distinction between healing and curing. Curing is often about fixing or eradicating a problem. It's what we expect from medicine. Get rid of the symptoms, return to whatever it is, right? But healing's something different. Healing is about returning to that wholeness. It's not about perfection. It's about wholeness. It's about integration. And healing unfolds through relationship, through the ways we're seen, we're held, we're heard, through love, through truth, through connection. We heal when we're witnessed without judgment, when we can hold space for each other in the messy and the sacred and everything in between. And that's why healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in community, it happens in presence, it happens in relationship with ourselves, with others, and something greater than ourselves. At the end of our Watch What Was Our meetings, we do this thing, right? We take a moment, look around the circle, or if we're on Zoom, we always call them the Hollywood squares, right? We're looking around those. And we end the meeting by saying, recognizing that recovery is one of those things no one can do for you, right? We all need to do our own individual work. And then there's the big and. And you cannot do this one alone. You cannot do this one alone. We need each other in this independence, not codependently, in this independent being. So when we say that healing is relational, we're naming that healing lives in the space between us. There we go. So we're speaking about here societal healing beyond the individual, right? And the title of the slide says societal healing equals reckoning, community, and restoration. If addiction is the disease of disconnection, then healing must be a return to connection. not just personally, but also collectively. That means healing isn't only about inner work. It also requires reckoning with harm, restoring relationships, rebuilding community. We don't just need more coping strategies. We need systems that stop throwing people in the river in the first place. So when we talk about reckoning, restoration, and rebuilding, this isn't new. Both yoga, again, and the 12 steps have been pointing us in this direction for a long time. In the 12-step tradition, steps 8 and 9 guide us toward making amends, not just saying, I'm sorry, but really looking at the harm we may have caused, taking responsibility for it, and beginning to repair. That's a personal reckoning. And then when we do it in community, it can become a model for collective healing. And yoga, again, gives us the yamas, those ethical foundations. Ahimsa, non-harming; satya, truthfulness; aparigraha, non-grasping. These aren't just personal values. They're relational. They're about how we live with one another and how we create a culture of care. I always appreciated some teachings that I've received around ahimsa. Right, for a long time, I had ahimsa kind of set as this meant that non-harming, that I did no harm. But then I received a teaching that brought into light for me that ahimsa is also blocking harm. It's blocking harm. When I see others in harm's way, if I can do something to block that harm, right, that's ahimsa. And it opened up a whole world for me with that realization. So whether we're talking the 12 steps or the Yoga Sutras or yoga philosophy, it's same, right? Healing is about relationship with ourselves, with each other, with the systems we live in, and with the sacred. And then there's this one, 3 pillars of collective healing. So these are the 3 anchors that I think about and return to when I think about what collective healing might look like. And the first point there says community-based. So healing happens, like we said, in spaces where we're seen and held and heard, right? And spaces like that, I think of like peer support groups, places where there are group rituals, just like we're doing here, group rituals, right? Where there's collective care, loving and skillfully used. These are anecdotes to disconnection. They help us remember that we're not alone. The second pillar is shifting narratives. Stories shape systems. If we want to change the culture, we have to change the story about who's worthy, about what healing means, and what it takes to belong. And then this third one, reconnection with the earth. Somehow we put ourselves above nature, forgetting that we are nature. We're just another animal walking this planet. And we've forgotten that. We put ourselves above it with this extraction mentality, right? When we reconnect with the earth, we reclaim a sense of place, rhythm, and belonging. Ecological restoration is part of collective recovery. And that takes me back to the story, the image of upstream, right? That reminds us healing isn't just about pulling people out of the river. It's about changing the conditions that are throwing people in to begin with. And that means we need each other. We need new stories, new systems, and new ways of being. And honestly, in this moment we're living through right now, that can feel really, really, really overwhelming. Sometimes it feels, at least for me, that we're standing on the edge of collapse. And maybe we are. You know, I'm told we're living in Kali Yuga, the age of discord and dissolution. But in the yogic tradition, even Kali, the fierce, the terrifying, the destroyer, is also a mother. She doesn't just burn things to destroy them. She destroys to clear the way, to make space for something more true, more whole, and more real. I did it again. So, in that spirit, I'm going to close and we're going to open up for questions. I'm going to close with a poem, right? It's a poem that for me feels like a guidepost for this time we're living in, a way to remember what we're called to, you know, so that we can make it through this time together. Okay, and I got time, so I'm going to see if I can find the whole poem. I was just going to read a little piece of it for y'all, but I'm going to see if I can't get to the whole thing. Here's where it is, just in case you're interested. Hang on for 1 second. Okay. So it's called Prerequisites for Preservation. And it's, the author of this is Naima Penniman. And it says, we're going to need to get organized and live beyond boundaries, soften our hearts, leave behind our baggage. We're going to need to talk to each other, relinquish our control, relinquish our comfort, coexist. We're going to need to give up our addictions, confront our pain, ask for help, and give more than we take. We're going to need to remember. We're going to need to forgive. We're going to need to let go. We're going to need to let go. We're going to need to feel fully, to hear our intuition, make up our minds, enact change. We're going to need to look at ourselves, shed our ignorance, reconcile our privilege, sacrifice shame. We're going to need less, revive our instincts, take care of our elders, learn from the young. We're going to need to heal our fears, tell our secrets, share with our enemies, and love people unlike us. We're going to need to study existence, refine our dreams, mediate our shadows, cure our disbelief. We're going to need to pray. We're going to need to love. We're going to need to surrender. We're going to need to trust. We're going to need to endure. We're going to need to give light. We're going to give light because we are light. So I just want to take a moment here and thank you once again. This whole idea about healing isn't about me. Healing really is about we. It's about creating spaces where connection is the norm, where culture and community support wholeness, where we remember that we belong to each other and to the earth. My invitation for all of us is to let's keep swimming upstream together. Thank you. I'm really cracking myself up here because I think I have this thing so perfectly timed. and then I did it again. So I want to take a moment and just invite if anyone has any thoughts or comments or questions in the whole thing that we've been discussing over the past two satsangs or from the workshop today or any of that, if anything relevant. Come on, y'all.
Yeah, hi there. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about like how the Y12 program works and like what those meetings look like. And,
yeah, I'd love to. So right now, again, the primary program, the flagship program is Y12SR, right, which is the Yoga 12-Step Recovery. Soon to be, there'll be other Y12 programs, like a Y12 for harm reduction, or a Y12 related to cognitive behavioral therapy, or with other forms of addiction. But the one in the world that has been for so long now is Y12SR, the Yoga 12-Step Recovery. And there are meetings across, really internationally, across several countries across the world, most of which the meetings are in the United States. And how they roll out, my teacher says the answer to everything is it depends. So there is one little it depends factor. So it can be like a 12-step meeting where there's a topic, there's a set of community agreements read, and then there's a topic that's brought up or a reading or subject matter that's brought up for sharing, right? And then directly after the sharing, there would be a trauma-informed, themed yoga practice based in whatever the spiritual principle is that underlies the topic or the reading that's going on there, right? And Y12SR's theme from its very beginning has been the issues live in our tissues. And the idea that when we combine this cognitive work with the somatic work of yoga, we start moving things out in a different way, right? So we know we follow a lot of the work of in our yoga practices. We work a lot with connective tissue. We work a lot with the work of Thomas Myers, right? His work is called Anatomy Trains, and it's a lot to do with connective tissue. And so we know common areas where things get stuck, right? Where issues live in our tissues. And so our yoga practices center how to open that up to create flow. How to create flow. We did a little bit of one in that little thing we just did with Find the Middle. At the end, when you open your mouth and just let it out, right? It said one of the common areas things get stuck is right here, right? The unsaid, the things we don't say and that we may stuff, get stuck right here. So just doing little things to encourage things that are stuck to find flow, right? So that energy can move through, right? Instead of coagulating and getting stuck. And we can bring use the process of inviting the mind and the breath to travel together to wherever it is that we're working, that we know things get stuck, so that things can begin to move, right? So that things that are stuck can begin to move. And that's kind of the basis of it. And I said it depends because some of our, we call them peer support guides. Somewhat will do the practice first, then the meeting, or you can do the meeting first and then the practice. It doesn't really matter as long as they're coupled, right? That I'm doing the cognitive and the somatic work, right? That those two things are coupled. It is interesting whether it goes that way, kind of depends on the energy of the space, right? You come into a space and things are frenetic and really rajasic, right? I would probably start a meeting like that out with the practice first, then the meeting, so the nervous system can settle down and we can do some things in a more didactic way, right? But I come in and something's a different way. Usually I default to doing the meeting first and then the practice. Does that give you kind of an idea?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I just want to start there. My question is, what happens when we have a community that is unaware or oblivious and is not supporting us in our healing? I know you said healing starts within, but then going forward into our community, what if we aren't getting the support that we need? Is it literally we look for a different community for that support, or is it the individuals need to make the immediate community that we are a part of aware of the healing that I need or we need?
Yeah, yeah. Great question. Great question. And I'll have to give my teacher's answer. It depends, right? It kind of does depend. You know, because sometimes there are times when you get to a point and the answer very well may be you need to go, right? That could be an answer, right? However, what, I have found in working with resistant communities or resistant really people is, we're in a culture that another part of the culture is call out. We have this tendency to, everybody wants to call everybody else out, right? And what I'm finding, and it is proven true more and more and more and more, it's almost like at its heart, all of us are like one of my favorite movies in the world, which is Avatar, right? And how the blue people in Avatar, they say to each other, first thing they say to each other is, I see you, right? And a lot of times when I don't have a place and I don't trust that I can be seen or heard or honored, then my response is to act out. My response is to resist. That's a survival response. That's a trauma survival response. But I find more and more, although sometimes, I got to tell the truth, it's little by slow, right? But I find more and more when there is this sense, when I'm coming into it with this heart of, I see you, right? I see you. I'm witnessing your pain. I'm witnessing what you've been through. I know your history, and I'm here, and I'm witnessing that for you. Sooner or later, something breaks down, right? That doesn't mean you ever put yourself in harm's way, right? Like I said, it depends. If it gets to the point where you're in harm's way, that means time to go, right? That you may need to do something different, right? But I'm finding that working within that communities, that people who aren't used to being heard or seen or trusted or any of those kinds of things, you know, their actions are a lot of times out of that trauma response. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. One more, come on. Well, okay, we have a panel tomorrow night, right, Durga? Yeah. So, well, there'll be an opportunity, I think, for questions for the three of us, for Durga and Vimalasara, and for I. So, thank you so much. I appreciate and deeply honored always to be here and to be a part of anything that Shivananda Bahamas does. So, thank you.
So I'd like to thank very much Nikki Myers for this beautiful presentation tonight. Let's give her another very big hand. And tomorrow, Nikki Myers will be offering another workshop here at 12 o'clock as part of the Symposium on Healing at the Root, Addiction, Habit, and the Path of Integration. And also tomorrow, we'll be having in the evening satsang, the last presentation as part of the Symposium. We'll be having a panel with all of the presenters as part of the Symposium, Durga Lila,